On the night of October 3, 1926, a truck rolled into the river outside a small city most Americans have never heard of. No witnesses came forward. No bodies surfaced for 2 days. And the local paper called it an accident. But the sheriff's deputy who found the tire mark said something different, quietly, off the record. Accidents don't come with bullet holes. They called it a city because the map did. In truth, it was a working town, a river town, factories, boarding houses, and churches that filled on Sundays like clockwork. The kind of place where strangers were noticed immediately and remembered. And like most river towns in the 1920s, it had a secret that smelled like yeast and copper, a secret that paid in cash. Prohibition didn't stop drinking. It reorganized it. It took something ordinary and made it valuable. So suddenly, everybody had a reason to be involved: farmers, factory workers, even people who considered themselves respectable. In bigger cities, bootlegging became the territory of syndicates. In small places like this one, it stayed personal. It stayed local. And when it turned violent, there was nowhere to hide. The story begins with 3 names. Not famous names, no headlines in New York. But here, they were the weather. They were the air people breathed. The Oaks family owned land outside town, apple orchards, a mill, and enough cousins to fill a choir. They didn't call themselves criminals. They called themselves providers. The Kellys came later, Irish laborers who learned quickly that muscle and nerve could buy what birth could not. They ran their liquor like a business. Clean routes, reliable drivers, careful bribes. And then there was the badge. Sheriff Edgar Harlow, elected twice. A church man, a family man. And in 1926, a man who had to decide whether law meant paper or blood. Every war has a moment before the war. A moment that feels small at the time. A crate missing. A truck late. A rumor that won't stay buried. One night, 12 crates of medicinal alcohol arrived on a manifest that didn't quite match the paperwork. The crates vanished before sunrise. And by noon, the Oaks were at the sheriff's office demanding arrests. Sheriff Harlow had deputies who leaned different ways. Deputy Walt Mercer, an Oaks man married to an Oaks cousin. Deputy Ray Stennett, a Kelly man owing money and pride in equal measure. Harlow tried to keep the peace. He tried to keep the city quiet. But peace in a bootlegging town isn't the absence of violence. It's a bargain. And bargains break. 3 days after the rail shipment disappeared, an Oaks driver named Cal Turner took the Orchard Road home. He wasn't a boss. He wasn't a gunman. He was the kind of man who did what he was told and tried to feed his kids. They found him face down in the ditch. 2 holes in his coat. No money missing. No liquor stolen. Just a message written in smoke. The funeral filled the churchyard. Not because Cal Turner was famous, but because everyone understood what it meant when a man got killed for the road he drove on. The Oaks came in numbers. The Kellys came in silence. And Sheriff Harlow came with his hat in his hands, trying to look like a man who could keep a lid on boiling water. After the service, someone lit a cigarette too close to someone else's shoulder. A shove became a punch. A punch became a knife drawn halfway out. If you wanted to understand the bootlegger war, you didn't start at the sheriff's office. You started here, under the city, behind a false wall, where the law and the outlaws drank from the same bottle. Bribes were never called bribes. They were called donations, or help, or just respect. On the 7th night after Cal Turner's death, the Oak South barn caught fire. Inside were barrels, some cider, some whiskey, some things that were better not named in court. Neighbors ran with buckets. The wind laughed at them. By the time Sheriff Harlow arrived, The barn was a skeleton of embers, and on a fence post, hammered into the wood like a joke, was a horseshoe painted green. Sheriff Harlow requested help from the state. But help moved slowly when politicians were busy pretending they didn't know what was happening. That same night, an Oak's cousin came to the office with two things: a list of suspected Kelly drivers, and a promise. Harlow didn't answer. He didn't have to. In a small city, silence can be a contract. 2 nights later, a Kelly truck crossed the river bridge with no lights. Inside, liquor, cash, and one passenger who wasn't supposed to be there. A deputy. Not Mercer. Not Harlow. Deputy Ray Stennett. By morning, the truck was gone. Deputy Stennett was missing. And the river. The river carried a new kind of quiet. In Part 2, the city stops pretending. And the bootlegger war moves from shadows to Main Street. Small cities are built on routines. Milk delivered. Whistles blown at the factory. A newspaper slapped on a porch. And then, one morning, the routine breaks. Deputy Ray Stennett didn't show up for roll call. By noon, the rumor had a shape. Stennett was dead. Or Stennett had run. Or Stennett had been traded like a poker chip. In a bootlegger war, truth isn't what happened. Truth is what people can survive believing. On the second day, the river gave something back. Not Stennett. A different man face down, pockets turned out, hands tied. The sheriff called it unknown assailants. The Oaks called it Kelly work. The Kellys called it Oaks lies. And ordinary people locked their doors earlier. In the beginning, the war lived in back roads. But it didn't stay there. Because liquor doesn't just move in the countryside. It moves through stores, through banks, through the hands of men who look respectable in daylight. When cash starts pooling, everyone notices. And when it stops pooling, everyone panics. Sheriff Harlow finally acted. Or appeared to. A raid, late, loud, and carefully aimed at a speakeasy the Kellys used. But here's what the arrest report doesn't say. The owners were tipped off. They found a few drunk men, a stack of glasses, and exactly enough liquor to make the papers believe the sheriff was trying. The Kellys changed routes after the raid. They moved at night. They used a convoy. But an ambush doesn't require luck. It requires information. Witnesses later said it sounded like a storm made of metal. By the time the convoy crawled back into town, one driver was bleeding out in the passenger seat. And the Kelly boss, Tom Kelly, had a new certainty. Somebody in law enforcement had sold them out. This is where wars become inevitable. When a leader decides peace is weakness. And that decision is contagious. The first bomb didn't kill anyone. Not directly. It shattered the windows of Oaks Hardware, blackened the sign, and woke the entire city at once. In small places, violence is usually private. This was public. And once violence becomes public, it becomes political. They demanded arrests. But arrests would mean choosing a side. And every side came with consequences. The mayor wanted calm for commerce. The sheriff wanted calm for survival. And outside City Hall, the people wanted calm because their children couldn't sleep. Deputy Mercer, Oaks-aligned, loud, confident, was seen behind the speakeasy 2 nights after the bombing. Then, he vanished. No body. No report. No funeral. Just absence. And then, as if the river itself wanted to speak, the missing truck returned. Empty. Cleaned. No plates. But there was one thing inside. That's when Harlow understood what he'd refused to admit. The war wasn't between 2 bootlegging families anymore. The war had eaten the law. Sheriff Harlow drafted a request for federal agents. Not state. Federal. A step that would embarrass the city and ruin careers. He put the letter in his desk. Then the lights went out. The end of a war isn't always a victory. Sometimes it's just exhaustion. Sometimes it's silence caused by fear, not peace. And sometimes, in small cities, the end is negotiated in kitchens, not courtrooms. What happened in that room exists in 3 versions: the sheriff's version, the town's version, and the version nobody ever said out loud. The voice belonged to someone Harlow trusted. Someone close enough to enter without breaking a lock. A deputy. A friend. Or a man with a debt. In the morning, the official report said, "Attempted burglary. Suspect fled." But the blood on the floor said something else. 3 days later, federal agents arrived. Not because the mayor wanted them. Not because the sheriff invited them. Because someone, quietly, made sure the right people in the right offices heard the right rumors. The moment the feds appear, criminals get nervous. And nervous men make mistakes. The Oaks began suspecting their own drivers. The Kellys began suspecting their own accountants. And the Badge, what was left of it, began suspecting everyone. Wars in small cities don't end with surrender. They end when trust collapses. A week after the federal men arrived, 2 representatives met. Not the bosses. Not the shooters. The older men, uncles, advisors, the ones who knew the cost of funerals. They met in a farmhouse kitchen outside town, under a single yellow bulb. And they spoke like men negotiating weather. They didn't shake hands. They didn't sign anything. They just agreed. And in small cities, agreements don't need ink. They need consequences. The last killing wasn't dramatic. No crowds. No sirens. Just a man who knew too much, walking down a road he should have avoided. And after that, the city went quiet. Not safe. Quiet. The federal agents arrested a handful of men. Drivers, bar owners, 1 accountant. No major bosses. No true architects. Because in a small city, the architects are also donors, neighbors, church members. And the system is built to protect itself. Sheriff Edgar Harlow served out his term. He didn't run again. Some say it was his choice. Some say it was made for him. He refused interviews. He refused speeches. And when asked, years later, if the Bootlegger War had truly ended. Today, the city looks ordinary. Families walk dogs along the same river that swallowed secrets. Teenagers sit on the bridge rail, daring each other to look down. And almost nobody talks about the war directly. But you can hear it in what they don't say. In which last names still carry weight. In which old buildings have basements nobody renovates. There is one photograph in the county archive dated summer 1925. Before the war turned hot. In it, the Oaks and the Kellys are both present. Not together, not posed, but there. Same picnic. Same sun. Same day. Because that's the real truth. In small cities, enemies are rarely strangers. They're cousins. They're classmates. They're men who once borrowed sugar from each other's kitchens. And that's why the violence cuts deeper. Because it isn't just about money. It's about belonging. The river still runs past the city like it always has. It doesn't care about laws. It doesn't care about families. It carries what it carries. And if you stand on the bridge at night, when the wind is right, some locals will tell you the water sounds like whispering. Not ghosts. Not curses. Just history. Trying one last time to be heard.